The Creative Grids Pineapple Trim Tool by Jean Ann Wright is based on the same concept as her log cabin rulers. She developed an 8-inch log cabin ruler and the trim tool 2 that combines the 6-inch with the 12-inch size. The log cabins and the pineapple blocks are all based on squares that have the same concept. They all have a square in the middle and you build from the middle out. So the same technique that Jean Ann developed for the log cabin trim tools are used for the pineapple. Now on the pineapple block, here is a finished one in a 10-inch size right here. You can see the center square and you're adding opposite sides and trimming them and then continuing to add. But these have an angled edge. So instead of the ruler being square, it has a 90-degree angle on this edge and then it has a slanted edge here. I love this ruler because when you need to cut with the slanted edge, all of those markings are on white right here. So if I need to cut the slanted edge, this one is right here, and the only time I use one of the centering squares is on the first cut, which shows in white. When I get ready to do the second cut, which uses the 90-degree angle here, then I use these black squares. And to differentiate so it's easier for you to follow, you would start in this corner with a dashed, then on round 4 you would move up to the solid, on round 6 you would do the dashed, round 8 you would do the solid. And when you need to use the white, this one is actually marked for rounds 3, 5, and 7. Round 1 is the only time that you would use this white centering square. So I'm going to show you how to use this. I've already started by cutting my center square, and in this case I fussy cut it with the 6-inch squared up and fussy cut ruler with Creative Grids, and I added 4 strips to each side. You can do opposite sides and opposite sides, or you can rotate around the block like this, like you would with a log cabin. Now all I need to do is look at the ruler, and this is my number 1 centering square. So I'm going to lay that so my center square is right here, and I am going to cut this angle, rotate my ruler. So if you have a rotating mat, it works beautifully for this. Cut this and continue to rotate around the block, because what I'm doing is actually creating a square in a square by trimming this 1/4 inch away from the points of this square. So I'm going to do this one, and once I have done all of that trimming, it is going to turn out to be this size. Now I do want to show you that I had quite a bit of waste in here because I wanted it to show up on camera, but actually these pieces need to be cut at least 1 5/8 inches wide. They need to be rotary cut on one edge. The other edge really doesn't matter. So I had scraps of this that I was using for another project, and it was 2 inches wide, so I just used them. I didn't bother to trim them down any smaller. So this is what your block is going to look like once you add the first round. Now I need to go to the trim tool, and I'm going to use this square because it is round 2. To use that, I am going to add rectangles to each side of this. Again, they have to be at least 1 5/8 inches wide, but they can be any width you have as long as there is a straight edge on one side. I can use this to use up my scraps. If you notice, they don't have to go clear down here because I am going to be trimming this like a square within a square, so they really only have to overlap 1/4 inch right here. So when I place the centering round 2 here, I'm going to place it right on here, and then I'm going to trim up this edge, and if you notice, once again, this is 1/4 inch away. When you are starting these beginning rounds, I will continue to rotate these, centering that dash square each time, and trim up each side. So when I add round 2 and I'm done trimming it, I'm going to end up with a piece that looks just like this. Now I am going to continue to add rows around this until I get to a 6-inch, an 8-inch, or a 10-inch square. But when I'm adding right here, this is round 2, so round 3, I would go up here, and on the ruler, now I have to use this line because I'm going to use it for 3, 5, and 7. I'll use these when I add rounds 4, 6, and 8. The instructions in the ruler tell you when to stop if you want to just make a 6-inch block, or if you want to continue and make an 8-inch block. Now I'm going to skip a few steps because I want to show you on the 3, 5, and 7 round is for these. So in this case, I've got to lay this on here because this white line for 3, 5, and 7 gives you those angled cuts, and it guarantees that all of these segments are going to be the same width. So in this case, for 3, 5, and 7, I am going to do this line on the seam and then cut off these corners just like I did when I added round 3. This is adding round 5, and then I will get the corners that I need to finish round 5. Now if I am going to finish it into a 6-inch block, at this point we call them rabbit ears, and you are going to have 2 by 4 inch or 2.5 by 4 inch rectangles that you just add to the corners to finish the block. Once I do that, then I can take this and square it up with the right hand corner, because see, this will fit in that center square. If I don't want a 6-inch block, then I can continue the process and continue to add rounds around here until I get up to, for instance, an 8-inch size. When I do the 8-inch size, again, I'm going to use this angled line, this white line right here, to trim this. And then when I add my rabbit ears, I'm going to use this to trim it down, and then I have completed an 8-inch block. If I want to go to a 10-inch, I continue that process and add 2 more rounds. This time, again, I would use this for round 7. And then I would add the rabbit ears to the corners and trim it with the right angle to complete my block. And if you notice, the ruler is 10.5 inches wide, and so that gives me a perfect 10.5-inch square. When I do this, I can cut 2 sides, turn it around, and cut the other 2 sides. So I'll end up with a perfect 10.5-inch pineapple block. So with the same ruler, you can get a 10-inch, an 8-inch, and a 6-inch size. In this particular case, I did not trim these corners first, because in the 6-inch size, you'll notice that this is kind of small. So if you don't want to trim that, your block will look like that, and it's just fine too. It's a personal preference. Okay? Now there are several patterns available using this ruler on cut loose press. And this is a quilt that is done with the 8-inch size, because see, here's the 2-inch center and here's the 1-inch strips on each side. So these are 1 inch wide, so that equals the 8-inch block. On this one, this is called Pineapple Playtime, and if you'll notice in this one, these are 6-inch blocks, but she controlled the color. So in the pattern, she actually tells you what size to cut these rectangles so you can be consistent and use the same fabric in each block. And then if you notice, the secondary patterns that's formed is when they come together. The one on the wall behind me is the 10-inch version, which is entirely scrappy, but she used lights and then darks. She used these on round 1, 3, 5, and 7, and the darks on 2 through 8, and for her rabbit ears. This one is totally scrappy because she didn't care what color and what fabric placement she used for any of them. She just started and used all of her scraps, and you end up with this look. So that is the Pineapple Trim Tool by Creative Grids. I hope you enjoy it and have fun and play, and it's a great way to use up all your scraps.